So let's see if there's been a new theory that's come out. We'll talk about the history of this a little bit. Let's first read some of the news clippings that I found on this. Fox News actually says this. Quote, now I'm quoting, this is in your show notes, by the way, you can go see it. Quote, the oldest recorded alphabet may be Hebrew, according to a controversial new study by archaeologist and ancient inscription specialist Douglas Petrovich. Israelites in Egypt took 22 ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and turned them into the Hebrew alphabet over 3,800 years ago. I love how they just make that fact. Okay, Breaking Israel News says close to the same thing. They say, after years of intense study, Dr. Douglas Petrovich has gathered sufficient evidence to claim that the ancient Israelites took Egyptian hieroglyphs and transformed it into a writing system of 22 alphabetic letters, which correspond to the widely recognized Hebrew alphabet used today. Archaeologist, epigrapher, and professor of ancient Egyptian studies at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Canada, Dr. Petrovich used Hebrew and the Bible to translate inscriptions found on 18 ancient stone slabs. His findings have truly rocked Bible critics to the core. This seems specifically to me like I don't know. This is amazing. You know, they're trying to shock people, or I don't know what they're trying to do here. But this is not the way that we heard this come about. I first met Dr. Petrovich down in San Diego when we were down there, 3 years ago? So that would have been 2013, 2014 for the ETS, the Evangelical Theological Society, when he was presenting on something else. Rob and I both saw Dr. Petrovich present on this 2 years ago in Atlanta. He presented this specific topic at the Evangelical Theological Society in Atlanta, Georgia. We were not convinced then. However, I also am not a Egyptologist, nor is Rob. So we wanted to be very careful. In fact, we were going to talk about this last week, but we felt like we needed to really study some of what was going on here. Because although Dr. Petrovich is seen by many within the archaeological and Egyptology circles as somewhat being on the fringe, he has always kind of tried to find things, in at least from what I've seen in the past 3 years, he's tried to find things that are well, I think every scholar to some point tries to do this, tries to find things that other scholars have missed. So I think that that Petrovich is somewhat trying to say, you know, find something. Oh, I found this that nobody else found, and isn't this amazing, kind of a thing. So it seems from these news clippings that this is obviously a great discovery. There are a couple of things that I would like to note first, and then I'm going to throw this over to Rob, because Rob, being the Hebrew expert here, is going to be able to inform us maybe a little bit better. The several things that I wanted to point out. Petrovich did not discover these inscriptions. Okay, these inscriptions had been discovered over 100 years ago. The inscriptions are called this. Oh, and you can probably help me out with this. I don't speak Egyptian, so Serabit el Kadam, is that somewhat right?
Kedem, probably.
Kedem and Wadi el Hol have been known and worked on. Work has been done on them since before. Right around the 1900s, so like 1906, I think, was the first thing that was published on these inscriptions. The second thing I'd like to point out, Petrovich is not the first person to come up with this theory. And as Dr. Rolston recently wrote, and I will quote him here, he says, quote, "There is nothing all that new about Petrovich's proposal. After all, more than 90 years ago, H. Grimm wrote a volume entitled Altherbeshel in Schriften vom Sinai," I'm probably butchering that, Hanover, 1923, in which he argued that the inscriptions from Serabit el Kadem were Hebrew. Grimm can almost be forgiven because he wrote before the discovery of Ugaritic, almost. But even then, his views didn't find many takers, as he was manipulating the evidence to the point that his proposal had more twists and turns than a dirt road in a Tennessee holler. End quote. And the last thing that I'd like to point out about this theory by Petrovich, which I personally I don't buy. I don't think he's correct in this, but Once again, I'm not an Egyptologist, so maybe Rob can shed more light on this. But one of the things that I do think is interesting for those who do believe in the Paleo-Hebrew script, if you believe in Paleo-Hebrew meaning, if you've been posting Petrovich's theory on your Facebook page or whatever, this should be a huge problem for you, because what Petrovich is saying is that even when the hieroglyphs of Egypt were around in, were word pictures, Hebrew was not. That's what he's saying. That the Hebrews never had a Hebrew word picture association with their language. This is exactly what Petrovich is saying.
Right. In other words, to translate what Caleb's point is, for example, and you'd have to watch his video. There's one video that
which is in the show notes. It's all in the show notes.
Okay. He points to 3 particular inscriptions that he says feature the name of a biblical character. One is Asenath, Joseph's wife, Asenath. So he dates that inscription to I think the 18th century BC, maybe 17th or 18th. And then he has another 2 inscriptions that he dates, I think, to 15th century BC, still in the same type of script, that he says one refers to Moses, and another to Ahisamach. And Ahisamach is the father of one of the craftsmen who worked on the vessels for the tabernacle. And what Caleb is pointing out here is that Petrovich is reading, let's just forget all his claims, all these inscriptions, no matter, even though there's disputes about dating them, it seems like most scholars put them into the 18th century BC. But the one that presumably says Moshe wouldn't fit that far back, because you can't put Moshe that far back, so he dates it sooner. But that aside, Petrovich is consistently coming from a position that this is a kind of alphabetic use of these characters. In other words, it's not man, house, hand, eye, with some sort of secret message now, like we heard with the word shalom. Oh, it's teeth, mem is water, or chaos. That's just so nonsensical. So if you were pushing this group that we heard last week, and all excited about Hebrew word pictures and the secret meanings of Hebrew words, and you're also excited about Petrovich, you still have some time before you're going to be able to grow in discernment enough to see that you can't hold both those simultaneously.
Yeah.
Now, we're not even talking about the truth aspect of this yet. We're just talking about on a surface level. Here we have Petrovich is reading this, what we would say alphabetically. That, in other words, even though it's using the little guy for the hay, the little dude with his hands up, that the argument is that, yes, indeed, that was there are hieroglyphs of little guys going like this, right, with their hands up. But the Asiatic or Canaanite or whatever you want to call it in the Sinai mines in 18th century BC, when you had these slaves working in the mines, when they engraved this, those people were not literate in Egyptian. They probably saw the sign, and they used it for their own purposes, and they communicated things about, probably wrote their own names, and they probably wrote the name of Baalat, which is one that occurs a lot, Baalat, which is like a Canaanite feminine goddess, deity kind of thing. But what Petrovich wants to do, he wants to take that and map biblical stories and demand. He's saying that, look, there's actually biblical stories here intersecting with the archaeological record. And that's where you have authors like Christopher Rowlands, others saying no, and don't tell me back, because some of it has been spun like, oh, it's because you reject the historicity that there really was an Exodus. And Rowlands is saying no, that's not true.
Rowlands is a evangelical.